Today I'm changing the filter in my DIY spray booth, so I figured I'd take a moment to discuss how I crafted this little beauty mostly out of junk I had lying around the house. Welcome to Trehane Miniatures. I modeled the spray booth off of designs that I'd seen on Amazon that run anywhere from $99 to around $140. So I knew that I wanted the width of the opening to be about 16 inches, and I knew I wanted about a 10 to 11 inch depth as a working surface. It's basically square opening on the front, so this is approximately 16 inches high as well. And I wanted this to angle up at an angle so that I could use light and shine light down from above and illuminate what I'm working on. Basically, I knew I didn't want any lights fixed inside here because I was afraid that those would get mucked up with paint. Another thing of note with this design is that when watching the Ninjon YouTube channel, he has a very similar model that I think he picked up off of Amazon. And what I noticed is these units don't have filters on the back end. And he said that he had a little bit of spray coming out the rear of his unit. So he actually had a filter just propped up against the wall behind there to catch any residual spray that wasn't caught by the initial filter. So essentially he had another filter just sitting like this on the back of his unit. To alleviate that, I sort of nipped that flaw in the bud right out of the gate, and I created two slots to house filters. Now the filters that I bought for this initially are these PET filters that are cut to size. So with one purchase filter, I was able to get 4 individual filters out of that one purchase. And I want to say it was around $13 for this 8 MIRV, and I think it's a PET filter. The lowest MIRV that I would go on the front for catching the air would be 4 MIRV, and the lowest I'd go on the back to make sure you lose absolutely no particles through the filters would be an 8 MIRV. But you do want enough airflow going through to catch the paint, to move the paint and move it through the unit. So I designed this just going off of what I saw on Amazon, and I designed this before I saw lots of other very helpful YouTube videos that really simplify the design. So basically what they do, they'll take a storage bucket of sorts. Now this is smaller just for demonstration purposes. Set like a plastic bucket on its side, cut a hole in it, basically have a filter that just gets sucked right up against that hole, and then they'll have their fan mounted to the back side here with possibly an exhaust port. So with my unit, because I'm not using any hazardous materials through here, I'm not using mineral spirits, I'm not atomizing like lacquer thinners or anything crazy like that. This is really just to pick up the non-toxic particles of acrylic paints and keep them from messing up your spray area. If you're gonna use toxic or hazardous materials, you're gonna wanna use a respirator and have this vented to the outside by connecting ductwork to the outflow of this unit. But let's quickly get into what materials you need, because this is extremely basic. There are only 3 materials that you really need for this. The first thing you need is a very simple little box fan, which is what I have right here. And it's important when you mount this and you're creating this, you want the fan blowing that way. You want the fan facing the rear of the unit. So a quick example of a simple little square fan that will be mounted to a wood frame, and I'll show you that in just a second. Once you get this mounted, now this is actually a heater and fan, so I wouldn't use this exact unit. I would just use a regular fan. But once you get it mounted, you're gonna leave the unit on. It'll be on the whole time because there's no way to access the on-off switch and still have it airtight to move air through the unit. But we'll get into how to turn it on in just a second. And then the other item that I built this out of, and it's incredibly sturdy for what I built it out of. Basically, I picked up a whole bunch of these foam core boards. I got the Elmer's brand, and I picked these up. I don't know, I'm not sure, it was the end of August, early September, and I picked these guys up for 75 cents each. So basically, stores, they do their back to school sales, they have leftover supplies, and everything gets marked way down. So 75 cents per board, and I used about 3 of these for this design. The last thing that you're gonna need is some sort of frame. And I am pretty fortunate that I live very close to some softball fields that I walk by every single day while I'm out walking my dogs. And not a day goes by where there aren't some pallets sitting out by a dumpster. So I just picked up one of those, cut it down, and use that for a frame here, among many other projects that I do around the house. It's just crap wood that you can use for crap projects, such as this. This is the cord coming out of the fan. This is just a typical H-frame. The cross member that the fan is mounted to is mounted above the two running tracks of the frame, obviously. That also gives room for the cord to come out the back here. These are bolted to the feet of the fan. So even though I'm using these cut to size filters, I actually designed this unit to accept 10-inch by, let me get that right, to accept 10-inch by 10-inch square filters. So that is what this unit is designed to use. And so this is just a very simple little 1-inch deep, basically I cut picture frames. I just cut 2 picture frames that are 1 inch smaller. In other words, the opening is 1 inch smaller than the filter. And then I made the frames 1 inch deep right here. That way, the filters just drop right in. Once I got my measurements for the depth and the width, and I had the picture frame boxes built, I was able to just measure a line from the edge of the picture frame out to the width of the working table. And then I measured the height of the picture frame, and I wanted the inside of these flanges to connect right exact with the opening of the fan. So once I got the height of the opening, I just created an arbitrary angle and measured that out to the same length where the bottom was here. I hope that makes sense. The first part of this box that I made was actually a 3-sided box that goes right around the fan. So I got the measurements of the fan, and that's what's ultimately going to dictate the size of this box of your unit. And the size of the fan is also going to dictate the intake size. So basically that 3-sided box was just taking 3 pieces of foam core board to the exact measurements of the fan, like so. And then this just mounts right on the frame. Now, if you have not ever cut foam core before, I'll show you how to do that real quick. So when cutting foam core, after making your measurements, you're going to want to grab a straight edge. And the mistake I see some people do is they basically try to do it in one cut and just saw their way through in a single cut. And what that's going to do is it is going to chew up the edge of your board, and it will not glue properly. So what we do is and this is not even a sharp X-Acto blade. This is a very dull blade, but we're just going to make several light passes. I am barely pressing on this at all. Like I said, this is even a very dull blade, and you're just going to do this nice and patiently until it separates on its own. You'll see it pop off. You have a nice flat surface there to work with. Now, as far as gluing these together, I like to use these little sewing pins or alteration pins. I'll be honest, I don't know what these are. Basically, you just want to run a single bead of glue down the edge, and I'm using PVA glue, which is just basic Elmer's glue. This is not an advertisement for Elmer's. This video is not sponsored. And then you just put it where you want it, and what I do is once everything's lined up, grab your pins and you just punch them through. They don't stay in place for very long. And what's most surprising about this is how incredibly durable this adhesion is. I mean, this is just basically Elmer's school glue and foam core poster board, and this will not go anywhere. I've picked up this unit by the roof of the unit, and it hasn't come apart on me yet. Once this dries to my satisfaction, I will simply remove these. One final step I do is I do tape over this opening just to ensure that all of the air that the fan is moving, all of the inlet air, is coming from the opening at the front of the unit, and that it's not drawing air in from the top of the filter. This is probably unnecessary, but it makes me feel better. And I do not do that on the back end because, again, this filter back here is just catching particles that maybe have made it past the first filter. And I said I lift this thing up by the top. Again, this is just Elmer's glue and foam core board. That's it. I can lift up the entire unit by that, and it is all just glued together. All right, the last thing I want to show you is how to turn this on. Since the on switch is already in place on the fan itself, you could just plug this directly into a wall. That is not safe. I plug it into a power strip with a switch on it. To turn on the fan, I just have to hit this switch on the power strip. And you can test it. I mean, all we're moving is small particles of air. It also works with cardstock. Alright, and that is how I crafted my own little DIY spray booth for airbrushing miniatures with acrylic paints. I would like to thank my channel members for supporting all that I do on this channel. You too can become a channel member for as little as $1.99 per month using the link in the description below. Thank you so much for watching. Please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel to join our growing community of airbrushers.